Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Barbara Shaw. I'm a descendant of the Katy, Arundel, Warlpiri and Warramunga people here in the Northern Territory. I've been fighting against the Northern Territory emergency response since 2007. Everybody that lives behind the sign that I'm standing in front of is stereotyped and demonised as an alcoholic or somebody who provides pornographic material to youth. So these signs are actually disgusting. They cost a lot of money to get put up, and they need to come down. There's a group here called the Intervention Rollback Action Group in Alice Springs. Our group is made up of non-Aboriginal and Aboriginal people fighting for human rights in the Northern Territory. We're fighting against the racism that's in the Northern Territory since the Racial Discrimination Act has been suspended. And we're also running a Jobs with Justice campaign. There are a lot of people here in the Northern Territory that are unemployed at the moment. Aboriginal people in the Northern Territory are being forced to work for the dole because once they scrapped CDEP, everybody had to get on to Centrelink payments and start working for the dole. So now you've got Aboriginal people living in remote communities here in Australia, in the Northern Territory. They have gone from $1,000 wage or over $1,000 wage a fortnight down to like $300 a fortnight doing the same jobs that they had in the past before the intervention came out. And basically what's happening in the Northern Territory in the communities is that it's being used as a cheap slave labour. These men and women are working their guts out in their communities, basically getting half of their income managed or their Centrelink payments quarantined 50%, and a lot of that 50% doesn't even add up. Like for example, I get at least $70 on my basic card at the end of the day once all my bills and that are paid for. So if I was supposed to go out into the workforce and work for the dole, I'd be working for $150 in my bank account and $70 on my basic card, and it's disgusting how we Aboriginal people have to work like that. And how are we supposed to provide for our families when in reality, if it happened to a non-Aboriginal person, they'll be jumping up and down. If every other average worker in Australia had to work like this, there'd be a lot of noise happening in the big cities. Back in 2008, a Prescribed Area People's Alliance, which is made up of all Aboriginal people living in the prescribed areas, like living behind these signs, was actually formed, and that's like voices coming together from remote communities or people affected by the intervention. We would like to have a few more in the future. What our little group has been doing is travelling to communities and getting these stories that's impacting day-to-day lives, especially families, you know, that have got kids in their care. And while we're going out there finding out these stories, it's the same old story over and over. It's not working for us. Why should we have to work for the basic card when we're doing the same work as someone on a wage? You know, so Aboriginal people want to be able to provide for their families. They cannot work under these conditions. I have my two favourite books here. The first one is the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, and the second one is the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And I'd like to read an article of each book. Out of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, I'd like to read out Article 23.1, 2, 3 and 4. And this relates to employment. Everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just fair and favourable conditions of work and to protection against unemployment. Everyone without any discrimination has the right to equal pay for equal work. Everyone who works has a right to just fair and favourable remuneration, ensuring for himself and his family an existence worthy of human dignity and supplemented, if necessary, by other means of social protection. Everyone has the right to form and to join trade unions for the protection of his interests. That's Article 23 of this, and everybody should be getting paid a proper wage and have a union to represent them here in the Northern Territory when we are working with the basic card. United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, Article 17.1 and .3. Indigenous individuals and peoples have the right to enjoy fully all rights established under applicable international and domestic labour law. Indigenous individuals have the rights not to be subjected to any discriminatory conditions of labour and inalienable employment or salary. So as an Australian, I enforce this article out of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and as an Aboriginal person of this country, I enforce my right under the Article 17.1 and .3 of the Universal Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you have a good night.